Hey everyone, we are back. Thank you so much for joining in on the panel. We have Jason, Marcus, and Doug here who will be talking about artificial intelligence and where it makes difference for staffing. So I'll be handing over to Jason now. Enjoy the session. If you have questions, ask them on the chat. Guys, enjoy the session.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you not only for inviting me and us to this session, but for having the entirety of the summit. It's been a great thing to look forward to and to hear from colleagues around. It's one of the things that these things do. It forces everyone to reach out to each other and say hi. Before we commence with introducing the topic and asking some questions of my panelists, I want to make sure that you're aware of exactly how esteemed these panelists are. Gentlemen, I'd like, if you don't mind, give a quick introduction of yourself so everyone can fully appreciate who they're dealing with. Marcus, can you kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. Thanks, Jason, and always good to see you as well, Doug. Just to give you a bit of background, I've been in the staff and recruiting industry last 15, 16 years. Spent a lot of time with careerbuilder.com, where I rose through the ranks, you could say, from, I suppose, inside sales all the way through to running the staffing and recruiting division across Europe, and then moved to the Adecco Group about 5 years ago, where I was responsible for digital transformation. So started as employee number one, and then really focused on buying, building, and investing in HR technology companies for the group. We spent a fair amount in 2 years. We acquired 9 companies, and we invested in different organizations as well, and scouted about 1,048 HR tech companies. And I was president of Adecco Group X at that point. So long journey in the staffing and recruiting industry, and just embarked on a new journey. Actually, in fact, as of today, you could say, founder and CEO of EQ Community, that's focused on bringing multicultural professionals into the world of technology and empowering companies to become more diverse and more inclusive. So really happy to be here.
Thank you, Marcus. You're one of the rare breed individuals, I think, like Doug as well, who can bring sort of all of the perspectives, understanding how we build it, how we sell it, how we plan for it, how it becomes a reality. And I couldn't be more excited about your latest endeavor. So best of luck with all of that, and ask Doug for anything he can do to help. Doug, anything you can bring for your intro, please?
Well, I got a lot of slack on LinkedIn for confessing my insecurity of being on a panel that is esteemed. I don't feel nearly as esteemed, and I'm hoping Jason can join us. He's going to try to dial in, so potentially he'll get on and brings a wealth of information, especially from the staffing side. But just a quick intro. December 5th marked my 20th year with Beeline, and I think people have a pretty good understanding. Most of you probably hate us in the Fleas we extract, so I won't go into anything about being esteemed, but 2 decades in, and looking forward to being on this panel with you folks.
Thank you, Doug. Sure. Yeah, Jason Hellman, coming in from Bullhorn, will be with us shortly. He's our, the headliner, so we wanted to bring him out last, let it a little bit. My name is Jason Israti. I serve as Chief Data Scientist for Brightfield. I'm also a co-founder. And my background started in the world of data science. We didn't call it data science, in the world of biology, and trying to predict things like when a drug might cause a heart attack, or when certain things might imply a pollution event. And then I found my way in staffing in around the year 2000. Have been a part of this fun journey of how things and then increasingly take advantage of data. In this topic, it's my favorite and least favorite topic of all. It's my favorite topic because it's my job. It's what I do every day. It's what I think about, leveraging data to find patterns. But it's my least favorite because I think it's broadly misunderstood. We always say, like, artificial intelligence as an area of science or technology is really describing a how something gets done. It's not the what itself. And so I find it's better to talk about why are we talking about these things, and then how can AI solve that problem. Hello, Jason.
Hello. Sorry, I think that Hopin did not want two Jasons on this call. I'm glad we got it. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
We've already prepped the audience to know that you were just the main headliner and the most important to bring out. So we wanted to let like the opening acts get a few.
All right. Well, I'm going to take my turn to prep the audience to say that's completely untrue. I'm just here riding along for the ride. Excited to talk to you guys, though.
Yeah, and I guess to bring you into the fray, I'll bring my boring intro to ask you to give a little background about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Jason Heilman. I'm the SVP of Product Automation and AI with Bullhorn. I come to Bullhorn through the acquisition of Herefish, which was a tool that is primarily focused on automation technology, focused on the staffing firm. But we do quite a bit in terms of kind of in the back end where we kind of subtly power a lot of what we do through AI. And prior to that, was with a number of other, another applicant tracking system. So I've been in the industry since about 2006.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us. I think there's a great selection of people to bring interesting perspectives to the same types of topics. So in my intro, other than bemoaning the nature of the topic that we're talking about a how in light of a why, the other thing that's important is when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're really talking about two things at once. One is we call it artificial intelligence because we expect technology to mimic living behavior. Usually we mean human behavior. So the idea that on the other side, a technology, whether it's via text, via some other form of chat, that we could believe that that's a person there. But I think the 80% of what we call AI in this world is not trying to mimic a human intelligence on the other side of an interface, where it's really just trying to mimic human intelligence of how the brain works. So understanding, we say like machine learning, understanding data patterns and how data can tell us what's more likely to happen in one case versus another case. So we'll probably be talking a bit fluidly between those, and we'll do our best to be clear about which type we mean, because they don't mean the same thing. So to jump into the topic at hand, I guess we'll start, Jason, if you don't mind. What is your first memory of using the term artificial intelligence? If you go as far back as you can.
If I have to think about it, I don't know the exact day, but I think it's got to be in sci-fi. Like, I think it's got to be a movie. Maybe it was Terminator. That's probably my initial introduction into the concept of AI. If we move it more into the business world, I think, again, I don't know the exact timing, but it feels like it was shortly after the craze of big data. So it seems like we went in, everything was about big data. That was the headline for 2 years, maybe, and then it seemed like one day it snapped, and all of a sudden, everything was all about AI. And maybe that was the evolution of learning that with big data, that's the only way to process it. But I don't have an individual moment, but that feels like kind of where it came from for me.
Marcus, Doug, do either of you have a sort of an aha moment or a spark memory of when you started either you thinking about these terms as a kid or more professionally when it became part of the job and not just something in an external headline kind of thing?
I mean, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I coined the phrase many years ago. It was a long time ago. So again, I want to let these guys have their due. So Marcus, maybe you remember when I taught that to you many years ago, but I don't know what the date was. Maybe you do.
Right. Yeah. Turing often talked about the Libby effect. And
appreciate you remembering that.
Sorry. Yeah. Marcus?
Well, yeah. I think it was, I was born in 1984. So I think around that time was when I got a message from Doug. And my parents had mentioned to me that there's this guy called Mr. Libby, and he's coined this term. And if you follow this path, one day you may be on an AI.
I'm so proud.
Yes, yeah. So I followed that journey and got there. But I think one of the other times that I'd heard about AI, and it was probably in around 2008 actually, when we started at Career Builders to really start talking about recommendation engines. And there was a question whether or not recommendation engine was AI or not, and what that actually meant. And a lot of it was really a similar lookup, and we see it in a lot of consumer products and services that we use. But in the job board world, that's really when I started to come into AI and understand at least what it was. And I think the term recommendation engine is more, it's more freely used in AI now. But at the time, it wasn't called AI; it was just a recommendation engine. But I think that was probably one of the first times I started to pick that up.
So, I mean, when we think about even just the last 10 years, when you're thinking about like the era of big data, like you're saying, and there's been, you know, a lot of different marketing terms and cycles of hype. Jason, I'll come back to you, especially given your record. Which are the areas that you think where really the hype lived up to, or the reality lived up to the hype, and so applications of what we're calling AI in either definition really serve the purpose of the promise, and then obviously we'll ask about those that perhaps didn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think, and again, I think this is probably a lot to do with kind of some of the paths that we chose, but I think that automation, which often is conflated in with AI, is an area where it is living up to the hype, but it's not. It's maybe not as exciting and as sexy as AI, but I think what it does a good job of being able to allow people to easily configure business logic in a way that they don't have to have a computer science degree. So to me, that's the area where, and again, probably because of where I'm at, where I've seen the most success, because oftentimes I've seen that people are a little bit scared of what AI will do because they don't actually know what it's going to do. It's kind of, you're leaving a decision open to something that you haven't fully trusted. So I'm sure we'll talk about how the trust will evolve over time, and many of the things that look to be very promising to the industry. But for me, that's why I see, just because I feel like staffing firms in particular just really want to have so much control over the experiences that they're creating. And by giving tools that make it easy to create those, you know, that's just where we've seen a lot of success, and we've seen it kind of time and time again.
Sure. And so if we let's tunnel into that and get a bit more recruitment focused. And so, Doug, from your perspective, is there an area of the recruitment lifecycle that you think is just completely inappropriate to outsource to AI that must be part of the human experience?
I do, and I have to challenge my thinking, because I sometimes wonder, is this just old school thinking, and you know, perhaps I can't break the paradigm and I'm wrong, but I don't know. But I will tell you, like, I think there's a lot of promise in the life cycle, even in terms of matching. But I was thinking of it this way, like, and you said earlier, a lot of marketing is out there, like we're AI powered and all this stuff. So, but imagine you were single looking for a partner, and you went to one of these dating sites, and it had this proprietary algorithm that's going to match you. Would you hands down be like, yeah, no problem, let's roll? This doesn't work for me. So I think it'd be great from a vetting perspective to start to narrow the list. But personally, I still want to look somebody in the eye, and I really want to go into the cultural aspects and the softer skills. And I believe there's certain components of that can be enhanced, or at least informed. But personally, I still struggle with this notion that it would just replace all human element. It's not where my head is anymore. I don't think we'll ever get there.
Thank you. And thank you for this move, the powerful take the glasses off to make a poignant point. Yeah. Thank you, Doug. That was excellent. Marcus, same question, but sort of in the opposite, unless you want to disagree with Doug. But which are the aspects of
I'd love to.
Something new and different.
I'll leave there for disagreement. Go right ahead.
No, yeah. So to be fair, there are parts of Doug's statement, unfortunately, that I do agree with. I feel like there are pieces when it comes to the human elements and the human aspects, which are critical and crucial to making that match, right? And if you think about where AI could outperform humans, and I think that AI can outperform humans in many areas, it's really going to be where there's quantitative information, right? So numbers, data, everything associated around that. So getting to a short list, I really think that AI AI will be able to outperform humans. Now, getting to that final list and picking and understanding that cultural fit between organizations and doing that final match, I really feel that's where the humans will continue, the humans, right, and I'm one as well, will continue to add value over a long period of time. One other thing that I think is important, because it's not only the recruitment aspect, but the sales aspect. So I think that it's really hard to automate an enterprise sales deal. And I think that will be hard to automate for a long period of time because they have different needs. And I also think it's a missed opportunity if you do try and automate that, because staying close to your customer and really understanding the problem and working back is something that will help you to continue to build out those algorithms. So I think if it's high frequency, high volume, highly repetitive, lends well for automation. If there's a human element and aspect into it, my cultural match that's needed, I think that will continue to remain for some period of time.
I think the extension question there, and really curious for any of you to jump in for this, is it sounds like we're assuming that the AI or the automation has to be complete. Certainly, if you have someone that's behind the controls in either of the situations you're talking about, I would imagine that there's elements of AI and leveraging data and probability to help that person with that decision, even if it's not making the final decision. Like I always say, like one of the best examples of the success of AI is spam filtering. Can you imagine how much more spammy email we'd be getting, even not from the recruiters out there? Sorry. So I don't know, any extensions there of building AI to augment the human as opposed to replace the human in recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, sometimes we kind of even frame it as, it's your virtual assistant, right? So it is what helps you to be more successful and more productive. And I think as we look at where I hope I'm not jumping ahead here, but as I think about where the industry might go over time, I personally believe, and I think Doug agrees and Marcus, you do too, that the human is always going to be a very important element in the process. This is one of the most personal decisions that somebody can make. One of the most important, like what they do every day. Doug's been doing it for 20 years. And if an AI might not have been able to pick that job, right? And it's such an important decision for someone's life. So I think the human's always going to be involved, but I definitely think the role of a recruiter in an organization is going to start to change a little bit. They're going to be much more focused on maybe being more of a career advisor, handling those interpersonal relationships, and being there to support someone as they're making these decisions or as they have questions that come along. So I definitely think there's going to be a shift in the way that we interact with candidates powered by AI, automation, whatever the given technology is, that's really going to make it better for everybody.
Totally agree.
And better, including not just less expensive and faster, but better because it's more nuanced and more finessed than what unfortunately the current world of recruitment often offers. How often do we have to read stats on how quickly the human is scanning a resume and really playing a numbers game? So that to me is the main conflict between automation versus human. It's when the human's trying to act like a machine, that's when it deserves to be automated. It's when the human is bringing more of their EQ out, to Marcus's journey, then I think it makes a ton of sense. Speaking about some of the current realities, I mean, for any of us in the data business, and I think everyone on this panel, as we roll through from the start to what was hopefully the middle toward end of what we're living through in this global pandemic, has this been the greatest thing or the worst thing for those in the numbers prediction and forecasting business? How have you guys seen this? Has this been something that makes models get thrown away or something that makes models more valuable?
By this, are you saying, sorry?
COVID-19, global, the massive disruption to a world that was operating one way. So we've been collecting data and making probabilities and assumptions and training models on that data. And then all of a sudden, kind of within a 3-week period, at least outside of China, the world changed. I had to deal with that. I'm curious to hear how you guys dealt with it. Happy to call on someone or skip the question.
Yeah. And maybe just that to add a little bit on it, and just generally from a business standpoint, I think that whatever playbook you had around March, April, that just got torn up, and you had to start again. And I think that one of the it's obviously a challenge for everybody involved, but everybody was involved. So there was an understanding there. And I think within data, you're going to continuously get anomalies. And this is going back to the human aspect, right? We can take that into context and understand the situation and where we are. And now, if that was programmed by an AI and you were trying to make forecasts and there was no human aspect, it could have gone out of control. Whatever business application that you were really spending time on or getting your information from. So I think that this is just another point where it's important to have the human connected with the AI, or the predictions, or the data, sort of qualitative and the quantitative information as a combination is more powerful than one in isolation.
I agree. I think one of the more important things that we learned through it was we build AI to discover context. So certainly, if AI can think about context across thousands of variables at once, then shouldn't that be the best way to do it? So I think that was some of the positives. The problem is, if you didn't build your AI in light of global pandemic and what was driving it, then you're missing key assumptions and inputs to how that model should be thinking. And so that's where the human intuition, I think, comes in to test those assumptions and make sure that you can flex in the moment. Anyone else want to talk about how this has impacted your understanding of data and how it can tell the future?
Maybe I could jump in just a little bit. I think my perception, maybe I can't say specifically about thoughts I've got on the data side, but what I think has been great is the business side. So like every other business in the world, adoption has been accelerated for these tools in the staffing industry. And again, I think we all believe in what these tools offer and the promise that we're making, that is a good thing for the industry as a whole. And ultimately, as long as all of the purveyors of these types of technologies continue to invest with this newfound interest, continue to invest in building up their product suite, continue to be able to be configurable for whatever the future may bring. These two things, I think, align together. So we're all going to grow. I think ultimately it's helping the staffing industry to mature more quickly into these types of tools. And as long as the tools invest back in maturing with a maybe more frenetic world that's changing more quickly, all those kind of hopefully work together to create a better future for everybody.
I think that's a key point, Jason, on the adoption. When I think of it in that context, Jason's right. I get this question a lot about what has COVID done? And in the context of COVID itself, I'm not sure that that's created a lot of change, but economic downturn often spawns a lot of activity, especially around efficiency. So I think, Jason, in line with what you're talking about adoption, I see far more receptivity from our clients to look at what might be scary in the past in terms of AI or machine learning driven in the hopes of driving greater efficiencies.
Yep. We touched on this a bit before, but my experience is when you talk about AI, you get two immediate reactions at once, excitement and fear. Mm-hmm. The excitement, we know what to do with. That's why most of us at this point are using it in some form of marketing. But I think we often just kind of sidestep the fear. Why do you think fear is still a part of it? And are we not addressing it the right ways? Doug?
I think it's a major part of it. I think it stems from an awareness, lack of education. You mentioned some of the sci-fi films, Elon Musk, preaching doom and all the scary things that we hear the Chinese are doing. They're so far ahead of us. So the negative connotations associated with these monikers are terrifying. I think, Jason, you talk a lot in terms of it just being about predictability and data and things that maybe we were doing in the past, just in a far more elegant and accelerated fashion. So I think the excitement comes from, wow, it could be done, but also, oh my gosh, did I just lose my job? And, everybody's talking about human replacement. And I think most of us, if not all, in this whole forum, not just on the on the stage today, understand it's not about that. So that's my take on it. I think the more we talk about it and we show practical answers to the so what questions, and you still have your job because it's augmented intelligence versus replacement intelligence, I think we'll see higher receptivity.
That rings true to me. It's disruptive by definition. Disruption is change. Change is scary. So I think that makes sense, and we could probably all do a better job of what's on the other side of that change. Do one of you guys, Marcus or Jason, have something to add there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say to Doug's point, it's really bringing people along the journey, right? If you're not bringing, whether it's your staff internally or it's new hires on a journey, whether you're onboarding them, we've got to start onboarding people into AI and figuring out how they can leverage it. And so a lot of the fear comes from, I mean, if you're a turkey, you're not going to vote for Christmas, are you? Right. So if you feel like you're going to get eaten at your lunch, you're going to be on the chopping block. You're not going to want to drive it forward. Now, if you understand that, okay, I'm the one that's also going to be empowered by leveraging the AI, and this is why I think we talk about kind of human superpowers. How do you connect people to an AI or to that real quantitative information to give them their superpower? And I think thinking in that context versus the doom and gloom and all the fear mongering will really help to bring people along the journey. But people don't know, and they hear AI and it sounds scary because they're not in it. But once you get in it and you start learning, you feel like you've got this real adoption. And I think all of us, because it's so new, are learning every single day when it comes to AI. So education is a key to it, and come make sure you're being part of that journey as well.
Thank you, Marcus. And while we have you, think about the important topic of bias, especially in light of what you are founding. As a data scientist, I hear that word bias and I think about probabilities, and bias is what we do for a living. But we also know that there's positive and negative unconscious bias in hiring decisions, and so here we're talking about that kind of bias. So I guess to ask it in a different way than we often hear it in the newspaper, do you have ideas or thoughts on where AI and machine learning is being used to effectively combat unconscious bias? Or do we really only at this point have more of the examples of where it creates a negative reality?
Yeah, I'll take that one if you don't mind.
That was to you.
Yeah. I think there's two sides to this. I was actually speaking to a company earlier this week, and one of the things that they've done is they've implemented an assessment, right? And as part of that assessment, what they're finding is that there are people from diverse backgrounds, multicultural, Black people, different nations that are really now starting to go through the process a lot further, get to interview and actually get hired. And so they're like, wow, this is great. We're getting more people. And the reason being is the CVs and the candidates are blind at this point. And it's you take this test and then you go through. Now, the percentage of people that they are now hiring is still low in relation, it's relative, right? So it's in relation to the population. So there was a much bigger problem, meaning they just, the hiring managers weren't looking at these people because of their names. Now, you kind of solve part of that. Now, if you're excellent and you're top quality, you're going to get in. So that's great. The challenge that you have is really over a long period of time, how do you evolve the algorithms to ensure that everything's taken into context, so the population taken into context, the inherent bias is starting to be removed. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done when building the AI piece. So I see there's some positive pieces, but there's still a lot of work. I don't think we have the governance models around it because it's so new. And again, if you're not at the forefront and you're not on the front foot and being proactive about this, you're just going to be somebody that is going to be put in a situation where you're going to have to deal with the algorithms because they're already there and they're already built. So I think that there needs to be more governance and more structure around the AI that's being built and who's basically responsible for it.
And if I could hold you just for one other point on that, where do you think that governance should come from?
Yeah, so I think it's collective. I think that there should be a governance not only at the company level, but there should be with oversight of those companies as well, right? I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were just talking about the internet and the fact that you can access all this information isn't great to the red encyclopedia anymore. And we kind of forget that. And then you kind of forget the time when you didn't have to wear a seatbelt in your car. But we look back on that and we think, oh, like that's crazy. Or people are on airplanes smoking. That's absolutely crazy. And I think AI is similar to that. When you're building algorithms and there's no governance and there's no nothing, and we're gonna be thinking 20 years, that was crazy. How could you do that? So I think that those governance models, as I said, come at a company level, but you're going to need some governing bodies around it, but making sure that they are not slowing down innovation, because that's the challenge, the balance between driving innovation and making sure that you've got the structure around it. So yeah, company and boards as well. But I wouldn't say I've got the answer nailed.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
I feel like that's right. I mean, I think right now we're in the world where we're in an airplane without our seatbelt on, smoking cigarettes right now, right? So, and you know, going from 0 to 1 is where to be frank, you know, we've looked at opportunities where we can add value in this arena, and it's been difficult. You know, there's some ontologies that you can look to for keywords that can identify, but a lot of the baseline data, in some ways, intentionally doesn't include some of the information you would need in order to build out the models to track success. So, you know, I think it's there, but it really does take, you know, people like Marcus and others putting some focus and getting that first step where others can kind of build on and can continue to iterate and make that actually effective, and stop smoking on airplanes.
That's a good idea.
Marcus, you have too many one-liners to try to vote.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite, but I'm just going to stick with turkey on Christmas.
Yes.
Doug, I know this is a topic you're passionate about. I think this is one that's worth going all the way around. Anything we're missing, or opportunities, or other perspectives you bring to this?
I just think we talked earlier. Oops, I didn't want to do the throwaway thing, but as I think,
Doug, yes.
Thank you for asking, Jason. It's a difficult topic to discern and figure out. And when I think about AI, we talked earlier about it's predicated on data, and so part of the problem we have right now, and the murder of Mr. Floyd over the summer, I think created this massive worldwide consciousness that we've got to do something. Like, it's disgusting it's taken this long to reach a tipping point. And this is just race. We have gender, we have sexuality, all these different areas we have to look at, but the reality is we don't really have the data on it. And then I think there's a lot of fear of, could I put that in VMS? Could I put that in an applicant tracking system? And will I get sued? And how do I look at that? Because if we can get comfortable and promote self-identification, et cetera, in these areas, and people trust us, then we can start to utilize what we're talking about, machine learning, et cetera, to extract and learn and present opportunities. But right now, it's just kind of a blank canvas, so it's difficult. So when folks talk to us about, we really want to increase diversity, maybe on the contingent side, I don't even have a baseline. So that's great, we need to go after that, but what's the baseline? And there's really no way from a data perspective to do that. So I think just socially, there's a lot of work we have to do with each other to get to that point where we can start getting data points.
Yeah, completely. Especially since I think it was some of the points that Marcus was making, that it doesn't have to be as plain as I see this person, I identify them as blank, and I hold these biases consciously or unconsciously. It's also all the other things that are hidden, that may be variables in our system that we create models off of. So I think, like we often say, the first step is acknowledging that these biases exist, because that's how these models work. It's the whole point. We look for bias. Whether or not they're the biases we want to hone in on is the important question. Okay, we had a bit of a funky time start, so I want to be conscious of just not rolling too far. But one of the things I wanted to get from you guys is if we suspend disbelief and forgetting about the history of how we got here, everyone's bored about history stuff, whatever. If we suspend disbelief and look forward 5 short years, which do you guys think are the pieces that will look most radically different tomorrow versus today as a result of AI? And if possible, not just automation, but AI, if possible. Although I know they can blend in many cases.
I can jump in.
Go for it.
I referred to it a little bit, but I think even within 5 years, the role of the recruiter is going to look very different. I think that position will be massively important to an organization, but it'll be important for different reasons than it's important today. So, but to speak more specifically, I think pre-screening, applicant management, kind of database management, how you interact with your audiences. I think those are the things that are going to look very different. If the marketing, if we look at the top of the funnel, those interactions that are very time consuming and extremely inefficient today, and often inefficient in a way that isn't about losing time, but losing quality and not finding the right people. So that to me seems like the area where we've got just massive amounts of opportunity to improve the system in 5 years, a really reasonable time frame to do it.
And just one quick follow up with you, Jason. There. So if this title recruiter will remain, but the job will be different, is it the same profile of person, or is it a different profile of person?
If I go all the way to what I would love to see, I think it is a different profile. So today, I think the people that we look for are people with a sales background that are going to be very high energy, engaging, trying to persuade. Persuasion is a very important role in that process. I think it'll look more like I don't want to what's the right, just something that's maybe more nurturing, caring. I think not that recruiters today aren't that, but I think it'll be less of a sales role and more of like a customer success role in software, where you're proactively working and being an advocate, maybe is the way to think of it, for your candidates and their long term.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I completely agree. And I think that's one of the gate limiting factors of how this works is you're expecting different people to be behind the keyboard with different skills. Doug?
Yeah, I think vantage point's a little bit more from the buy side. I think, we're fond of saying the resume is dead and the job descriptions are dead. And it's a little bit hyperbole today, but I think we're absolutely going in that direction. And so one of the fundamental problems we have is that these job descriptions, they're just not good, right? And that's why MSPs are so important, why they're sitting there dissecting all the attributes that are necessary and having these calls with recruiters, and it's just not efficient. So to the extent that we will deploy AI to do a better job extracting what those attributes are, what success looks like for that outcome, versus abiding by a generic overall directional job description, I think there'll be tremendous efficiencies for everybody in that, and there's already good work happening there. So I think within 5 years we'll see a completely different approach to job descriptions, and I don't think we'll be using resumes that we do either.
Well said. You're here.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus, tell us how the world will most likely be most different.
I really think fundamentally it'd be different with matching. So, and the reason I think so is that there's been an emergence of platforms. And when you have the emergence of platforms, not only do you have the input, but you have the outcome as well. So being able to close that feedback loop over time to figure out who performed well in a position and who performed well in a job will allow you to feed the front end of that. Somebody told me a long time ago that a job of a recruiter was to really put round holes, or a round peg, should I say, in square holes, right? And that's what you do as a recruiter. And I think you're going to see less of that. And I think you're going to see more fits, right? So you're going to see more round pegs, more round holes, and you're going to see that to be refined more because of the closing of the feedback loop and understanding what worked. So I think the data is key, and we didn't really touch so much on that, but garbage in, garbage out. And if you understand the outcomes and how people are performing, then you're going to be able to train the models better. And I just see that infinitely continuing to get better.
Perfect. But I completely agree. And I think actually what you're saying and what Jason from Bullhorn is saying go hand in hand. The less your peg is round and more square, the more you have to sell someone that it is. Versus other skill set of finding more roundedness for the round, and that's how it makes sense for the inherent benefit of it. So better fulfilling the mission. I think everyone wins from that. Candidate, buyer, everyone. That's a great point. So we have a few minutes left. I've been a hog. I'd be curious if you guys have any questions for each other. I'm happy to open it up. For example,
I don't know about you. I'm looking at the notes here that say get off the stage. So I'm going to respect Jan because I think he's done an extraordinary job putting this together. And I'm going to be quiet. But Jason, if you want to be poetically waxing, that's up to you, my friend.
I was using the time we were asked. What is time?
What is time?
No. We don't have time for that for sure. So instead, I will just round us out and thank. I'll go back to where I started, to this esteemed colleague, Marcus. Thank you for the turkey doesn't vote for chicken. I'll be using that
for Christmas.
Jason.
It's not very quick.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of your comments, and we look forward to everything coming out of your laboratory. And Doug, I appreciate everything that you do.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Likewise. It was fun.
Doug, are you hot in that jacket, by the way?
No, I mean I'm hot. I'm not temperature.
Yeah. It was on my mind. I thought I'd ask.
Let me just explain something, Mr. Millennial. This is a sports code. We're trying to respect to the audience.
But
just so you guys are aware, I'm pretty sure we're still on.
Yeah, we know.
Oh, okay.
It's fun.
Again, thank you to Jan. Thank you to everyone who joined us.
See ya.
And we appreciate your attention.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Take care.